Hey, everybody. So today we're going to introduce you to Rachel Jeffs. And if the name Jeffs rings a bell, here's why. You may know about the FLDS Church, the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which for years, for decades, has believed in and engaged in polygamy and has long been facing allegations of human trafficking, sex abuse, and a number of other horrific things. And in 2011, their leader, Warren Jeffs, he was arrested, and he has since been convicted of 2 counts of sexual assault of a child. And that's why that name Jeffs probably rings a bell, because Rachel Jeffs is actually one of Warren's daughters. He has more than 40 children, and she managed to escape the group after years of abuse. And so in this conversation, she talks really openly and with a lot of candor, honestly, about what the escape was like. And she also talks with me about her uncle, Lyle Jeffs. He was one of the folks inside the FLDS who worked really hard to try to keep her from escaping, to try to keep her inside the walls of this group. So she has an incredible story of survival, bravery, and it's really about her standing up to a group that was giving women no voice. So I hope you'll sit back and listen. This is a really interesting conversation from a woman who has been through some horrific things and has managed to come out on the other side and is now a speaker and an author and has a lot of things to say that I think a lot of people need to hear. Here it is, my conversation with Rachel Jeffs. I'll start by saying I know that this is not easy stuff to talk about, so I appreciate your candor and your honesty in talking about this. If we can start from the beginning, and that is, can you talk a little bit about your childhood in the FLDS community, just kind of in broad terms, what it was like? What was that like? For those that aren't familiar, paint the picture for us a little bit about what that was.
In the FLDS, when I was younger, it was a lot easier than as we got older, it got stricter. So, we thought we were the normal ones. We were taught we were the most normal. We were the good people. The people in the world were the bad ones, So we kind of grew up feeling like we're special and we were the good ones, and everyone in the world was wicked and scary. We were told that people in the world wanted to kill us and hurt us. And so, we kind of grew up feeling like we were safe. We were in the best place possible, and we were God's chosen people. And with that, we had our traditions where we had to wear, certain clothing. The women had to wear dresses that went down to their feet and up to the top of their necks and their wrists. We had to wear our hair braided. We didn't get to cut our hair. There's lots of strictness, especially for the women. Obviously, the men had to stay covered too. They had to keep their face shaven. So, there were strict rules on dress code. A very, very huge principle we were taught was polygamy. Obviously, a lot of our religion evolved around polygamy, where a man had more than one wife. We were taught that was the celestial way, that was God's way, that he had many wives, and that we, to get to heaven, a man had to have multiple wives. And with that, only the prophet could tell whom to marry who, because we couldn't date. Women couldn't date men, men couldn't date women. All through school, we were taught boys don't look at girls, girls don't look at boys. The prophet decides who you marry. So you just pretty much were considered a pretty bad person if you flirted with a boy or if you wanted a certain boy, all that was considered sin. And we believed it. That was what we were taught from birth. That's the only way we knew. It's just kind of how it was. And of course, as a young girl, I thought boys were cute. I kept it all in my heart. I wanted to marry a certain boy, all those things. Through the years, I had different crushes, but I kept it to myself because, I thought I was wicked. And then through that time, when I was 8, then Warren, started sexually abusing me, which was directly against everything he taught. So it was a very confusing world for me personally. I was very confused why he was doing it. He was doing something that was directly against what he was teaching as the principal he was the principal of the church school. So every morning he had a whole room of young people that he would preach to. And his main teaching was, boys don't look at girls, girls don't look at boys, keep your bodies covered, all these strict teachings. And yet here he is suddenly starting to sexually abuse me. And so I was very confused. I at the time, I mean, for years, I believed I was his only victim. Come to find out he had many, many. Obviously, why was he a principal of the school? Because that was full access to kids. I mean, he was a pedophile and he had many victims. But, growing up and for most of my life in the FLDS, I didn't know he had any other victims. So he made me feel like, obviously, like any pedophile does, that it was my fault that he was doing it to me. So, that was just kind of a part of the confusion of growing up for me.
You mentioned a moment ago about the prophet. And for those who aren't familiar, in the FLDS community, growing up in that religion from your standpoint, who was the prophet?
Well, as a child and growing up, my grandfather was considered the prophet. My grandfather, Warren Jeffs, was considered the prophet. Warren Jeffs' father, obviously. We just thought he was perfect. We were taught that the prophet was next to God, that the prophet could not do wrong. He was incapable of doing wrong. And anything he said was as though it came from God's mouth. So that's how much faith and trust we put in the prophet. And we believed he was better than a king, right? I mean, we believed he was basically a god. So you can imagine how I don't look at anybody as too great of a person now. But I mean, it was just, we thought he was incapable of wrong, and that was just something we were taught from birth. So eventually when my grandfather died and Warren took over, well, naturally I had questions because I knew Warren had done wrong. And I mean, because, there were times that he was honest with me and he was like, I'm doing wrong by touching you or whatever. But at the same time, it was just like, okay, I mean, grandfather still put him in a position of authority. I mean, obviously, I personally didn't go tell grandfather, but come to find out, some of his other victims had, and grandfather Rulon still kept Warren in a leading position, even though he knew Warren had been a pedophile and touched young girls. So, I mean, it just probably was something that was just rampant in the FLDS.
So when he starts doing these things, obviously he's abusing multiple children in your community, you included. And and he knows what he's doing is wrong. How did he justify and how did he rationalize what he was doing if he knew it was wrong?
Well, he would make me feel like it was my fault. Well, Rachel, you want this, this is what he'd say to me. Or even though I was always avoiding him and trying to stay away from him and pulling away from him every time, it was just like he tried to put it on me as though there was something bad. I mean, I just thought as a child, because, as a child, you don't know how to place the shame. It's just like,
sure.
You're incapable of placing the shame. So it was just like, I just believed maybe there's something bad in me that's making him do this to me. And maybe he is so good, but there's just something bad in me that's making him do it to me, because I just didn't know how to place it. And I remember at one time thinking, well, at least, I have a father that's in the FLDS, because probably fathers out in the world are way wickeder, because, we were taught that the men of the world were so wicked. And so I just thought, and obviously I didn't know words like rape or molest or anything like that. We were taught any of that. So I had no idea that what he was doing was even against the law. I thought, oh, maybe fathers just get to do whatever they want to their daughters. I don't know. I was just in a very confused situation.
I can't imagine the level of confusion for you. He's essentially a prophet, as you said, a king in a lot of ways, and an authority figure, and what he's doing, and it's completely contradictory to the things he's preaching and saying. Did you ever talk to anybody about what he was doing, or was kind of the structure of this entire community was silence? Am I wrong?
I told my mother once when I was really done with it, and I was crying one night after he'd taken me out of my bed and done whatever he did to me. And then I went to my mother's room and I was crying, and she asked me why I was crying, and I just kept saying, Father, Father. And she's like, what did Father do to you? And so I told her. She was very angry. And so she went to his room. But after that, when she didn't come back till morning, and she never protected me after that. I don't know what he said or how he threatened her or what he did to scare her, or, I don't know what changed, but she didn't feel like she could protect me after that. She just let him still, he was supposed to be her priesthood head and her leader. I don't know. It's just so confusing. I think I don't hardly blame her, because I've heard stories that he also did the same to her before he even married her. So I don't know I don't know definitely, because obviously my mother died, so I can't ask her those things. But I wouldn't be surprised if she was also his victim.
Yeah. Was there a period when you realized that you were not the only person that had been victimized
Much
by Warren Jeffs?
Much later, after I had most of my kids, then I realized. Then when my sister told me, but yeah, that happened much later. Obviously, I eventually got assigned in a polygamist marriage before that. So yeah, but yeah, much later, my sister told me after she had read a poem that I had written to him, because obviously I had told a different one of my sisters about it. I don't know, it was just a series of events that unfolded that she ended up telling me, Rachel, I know what happened to you when you were a child, and I just want you to know what happened to me too. And I think that moment, I've never had a moment like that. And it wasn't like I was happy she had it. I was very sad that it happened to her, but at the same time, just like a huge weight fell off of me. Like, I knew it wasn't my fault. I knew it was his fault. I knew it was him. I don't know, just realizing it was something in him, not me, that was making him do this. Because if he did it to more than one person, then it was him, not me, right? I don't know. I always knew it deep in my heart, but it was just like through all the mental conditioning of all those years, I couldn't actually have that realization until I knew he had other victims. So in a way, it was a relief, but at the same time, I was so sad that it happened to my little sister. And then it was, that very, very moment, I was like, I'm going to leave this. I'm going to leave. I'm not going to follow Warren anymore. And my sister agreed at that very moment too. We will not trust him with our children. We don't trust him. We didn't leave right then, but we planned to leave.
What kind of fear was at play? You're essentially making a decision to turn your back and leave all that you've ever known. There must have been
definitely
immense fear.
Scary decision of our lives. I'll tell you, that was the scariest decision of our lives. And and I think too, even though I had wanted to leave before then, I felt like I could finally leave, because now I had one person that I knew I loved, that understood me. And I don't know, there was something powerful with that too. I just needed one person to understand me and why I left. I don't know. It's just how it was. And so that, I don't know, I just, even though it was such a scary decision, and I knew turning my back on that world meant my family would hate me. We were taught, if you leave the FLDS and you turn against the prophet, then you are automatically a liar. You're automatically the worst sinner. You will go to hell. That was the worst thing you could do, was turn against the prophet over any other sin. That's what we were taught. And so I knew I would be very shunned and hated and criticized. And, that's just the decision you get to face when you make that decision. I don't know. That's reality you get to face when you make that decision.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their head around what that entails for someone like you who's leaving that religion. You're essentially turning off the lights on your entire life as you've known it. And I'm curious if you can take me to kind of the day you make that decision. Do you just walk off the property and go to a motel? Like what? I don't even know how that works to kind of restart your entire existence.
At the time, I was in a house of hiding. So obviously, before then, I had been married to a man. I had been placed in marriage to a man that was 7 years older than me. He had 2 wives. So I was the third wife. I mean, that's all I knew, right? So, I mean, of course, you get to deal with all the emotions of him cheating on you, which it feels like, obviously. And all that polygamy drama was a lot. But by this time, Warren had separated me from my husband because he got weird and took all his girls from their husbands. I was in a house of hiding. So by the time that I talked to my sister about leaving, then I was in a house of hiding in Colorado, 11,000 feet up near Pikes Peak. I didn't have a car. I didn't have any way to escape at that moment. There was no way. I didn't have anything. But all I could do was plan from there out. So I didn't leave till the last day of December. So it was a good few months before I actually left. My sister ended up leaving before me. And I felt like I loved my husband. So I had wanted to have an opportunity to talk to him before I left, which never happened. And they ended up moving me back down to to northern Arizona, into a house of hiding there. And my brother-in-law ended up buying me a car because, I was trying to get things in order to be able to escape. So
emancipate, essentially, right?
Yeah. So eventually, I mean, it was, Warren found out. Warren was running everything from prison. I think there's so much we're missing, but Warren was running everything from prison. So when he heard that I had been going out and leaving my home, which was against the rules because we were supposed to be basically in a prison in these houses of hiding, then he sent word that I needed to move to the bishop's house, which is Lyle Jeff's house. I knew to move to Lyle's house was like definitely a prison because he had big brick walls all around his place, all around the property, and gates with codes. And nobody inside got to know the codes. So you basically were stuck in there. So when I got told I had to move up there, and Lyle called me, he's like, "I'm moving you up here tonight." And I was like, no, I'm not. I won't move tonight. And he was just like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, I won't move tonight. You have to give me till morning." And he's like, okay, my boys will be there first thing in the morning to get you. So I stayed up all night. I had my sister that had already left come get my kids. And I stayed up all night gathering my stuff together so I could escape in the night. So I could escape the next day. So when Lyle's boys came to help me move to Lyle's house, I wouldn't answer the door. I locked all the doors. I wouldn't answer the door. Obviously, my kids were not there anymore. I had sent them with my sister in the night. And, of course, all of a sudden, Lyle's frantic. He's freaking out. He's banging on my door. He's yelling, "Rachel, open up this door right now." He's going all around the house yelling at me, banging on windows and doors. And I just ignored him. And it was very dramatic for me and scary because that's just, now I look at it, I'm like, maybe it wasn't a big deal, but really for a very conditioned mind that you are making a decision of salvation versus damnation, all these things, it's just like, that was a scary, scary decision. And I didn't want to face Lyle at that moment. I didn't feel like having him scream at my face about how I was going to be damned and all these things that was going to result if I left. And so when he finally left the property, I opened my door and he had left a note on it that said, "Rachel, you can live wherever you want. Just please don't leave." And I thought, wow, they wait until I'm going to leave before they, be kind of nice. Anyway, so I waited till that night until it was dark. And eventually one of my sister-in-laws brought my car to me and I left. But of course I had all the drama of security following me. It was a big was a big escapade. I don't know. It was just
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're
it was
essentially,
scary. I had all the security following me out of town and trying to kind of corner me in, and turned down all these roads until I could get out of town. But yeah,
because,
eventually I left.
what it sounds like to me is, obviously the real component in that community is control, right?
Yeah,
And what you're doing is you are putting a crack in their ironclad control.
yeah, exactly. They hate someone standing up or thinking for themselves. That's just not okay. Which is why they keep education out of the community. They keep media out of the community. They just want you to only hear Warren's teachings, and that's how they do the conditioning. Warren has years worth of recordings that he has done for the people, that he's recorded for the people, and they have to listen to those recordings every single day, all day. And so it's just like, when that plays to your head every single day, all day, that's all you hear. That's all you think. That's all you believe. And that conditioning is just, that's how he went about the conditioning, was with those recordings.
When you're still in the community and going through these horrific things, is Warren Jeffs justifying this under the umbrella of God and his teachings? Is this,
he said everything he did was according to God. I mean, especially once he became the prophet or the leader, he always said, God is revealing to me that I should do this, or this is from God. He ended up to where he would only speak as though he was God. And, that's how he ended up getting his underage brides and convincing fathers to let him have their 12-year-old daughters. All that came about because he convinced them that God was having them do that, and that their daughters were in dire danger. Like, they're going to be killed or stolen if he didn't take them to his home to protect, And so these fathers were giving into him, thinking, oh, well, this is the greatest man on earth. We should give our daughter to him, And then, of course, as his victim, I knew exactly what he was doing to those girls.
I want to ask you about when Warren Jeffs was taken into custody, when essentially his existence as it had been for so long kind of no longer was a thing, right? He's taken into custody. The federal government takes him in. Talk to me about kind of the downfall of Warren Jeffs from your perspective, and seeing that from the inside. What was the feeling when that happened?
The day that my husband called me, because I was in a house of hiding in Vegas at the time he was caught. So when he called and told me, just the very first thing the very first thought in my mind was, see, Rachel, he has to pay for what he did to you. That's just the very first thought that came in my mind. And I just thought he deserved it. I naturally just thought he deserved it. I was already upset about him marrying the little girls. And I just felt like, what did he expect? But that's my own perspective. Watching the people that followed him, that didn't know that he was wicked, that didn't believe that he was wicked, then they felt very sad, like everything was good. This was so terrible. This is on us. This is our sins that is making him be in bondage. And that's what Warren would literally say to us from prison. It's your faith that will get me out of prison. It's your wickedness that is keeping me here. He put it on the people of why he was there. And so the people, they believed him, and they were praying for his deliverance continually. It was just a constant, we're bad, he's good. And for me, it was just like, no, he's bad. But I couldn't say it. I couldn't tell him that.
Right. Sure. You've mentioned the house of hiding a couple times. Is this sort of like a network of people that have stepped up and have taken you in over the course of time in various locations, kind of almost like an underground railroad of sorts?
No, definitely not. This is where the FLDS church actually went and purchased homes in different areas all through the U.S. And then they're like considered houses of repentance. Either we, as Warren's family, were either on the lands of refuge, which was the South Dakota, the Texas, and the Colorado lands that were purchased as compounds. Either we were there or we were in these houses of hidings where we were supposed to be repenting of our sins, and these houses of hidings, they put a bunch of women there or one woman. Sometimes we were all by ourselves, right? And we had to repent, but we had no car. We had no access to the outside world. Someone would bring us food once a week or once every 2 weeks, You just were kind of in this prison, in this home, in this house, and it was a house purchased by the FLDS, and Warren had control over it. But you were just basically supposed to sit in that house, listen to his training, sow, and repent of your sins.
It was like a house of confession and cleansing of sorts.
Yeah, exactly. It was like I remember at one time, because, at one time when I got sent to a house of hiding, Warren had them take my kids from me for a good amount of time, for up to 7 months. Well, he told me it would only be a week, but then it ended up being 7 months. And I just remember sitting there. I was obviously very angry most of the whole time. I was just upset at him. I was upset because he was accusing me of things I knew I hadn't done. And it was just so crazy. And then it was just like I was in a worse prison than he was, because I couldn't leave. I couldn't even talk to people. He could talk to people. I remember feeling so angry at him. And at one time while I was there, I walked, because this was down in the Short Creek area, what we call Short Creek, which is the Colorado City, Hilldale, Utah, Twin Cities. And I knew my kids were in that town. And so I walked to the town and found them, what house they're at, and I'd watch them through the gate. And then at one time, one of my sister wives found out that I was watching them from the gate, because they had a big, tall, permanent, non-see-through fence, but the gate had some holes in it. But it was a big iron gate, and so I could just watch through those holes.
You were watching your own children through the holes in a gate from a distance.
Yes, because they had taken them from me. And so one of my sister wives found out that I was watching my kids through the fence. And so she told me, she was the nicest one of my sister wives. And she said, well, I'll have your oldest daughter come secretly say hi to you next Sunday, because I do it every Sunday, because that's when the town was sleeping, right? Sunday morning. So the next Sunday I walked, and it was a long walk from where I lived to them. It was it took hours to get there to walk, because obviously I didn't have a car. Anyway, I was standing at the gate waiting for her to come out, and she started coming out to talk to me. And then a couple of the other of my sister wives were like yelling at her, and they wouldn't let her come to me. So I was really angry. I was just suddenly, at that moment, I was just so angry that they were making her feel like I was bad and she couldn't come talk to me. And they had accidentally not locked the gate that day for some reason. It was always locked, but it wasn't that day. So I went in and trying to go in the door, but they had locked all the doors, and so I couldn't get in. But then I saw that one of the windows were barely open on just the floor level. And so I went to the window and I gathered up my kids. And of course, my sister wives called Lyle right then and told him that I was in the house. So he headed right over to get after me. But you know what? That rebellion got my kids back, because 2 weeks after that, Warren made him give my kids back to me. And it just kind of showed me that if I stood up for myself and if I rebelled, then they got scared and they were afraid I was going to leave or something. So then they gave my kids back to me. So in the end, I was really proud of myself for rebelling, even though I felt at the time, which kind of shows you how the conditioning just makes you feel so guilty. I felt like I was doing wrong because I had been taught against this. I was going against everyone's directives. I was disobeying everybody. But something in me, I was just so angry they were taking my kids, and it didn't feel right. And I wanted, and it's not like I could say, even if I did this, I'll just call the cops and have them help me get my kids. You couldn't do that because all the cops in that town were loyal FLDS members. So they're not going to help me, right? I mean, it's just like, you can't just dial 911 and get some help. It's just not like that when it's a community that is all faithful to Warren Jeffs.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize, like, you literally had nowhere to turn. Like the FLDS has overtaken every element of society from your perspective.
Right.
I want to talk to you a little bit about kind of looking back at that life. And now you are obviously out. What's your relationship like with religion these days?
You know, I have a hard time joining a religion because of everything I went through, looking to a man as anyone as far as for a direction to, a connection to God for me. I don't, or not even just man or woman, anyone. I just don't look to anyone as a connection to God for me, because I just think we, it's so crazy to think that we can't just pray to God ourselves. Yes, I do pray. I do believe in God, but I'm not like, I'm very against extremism in any way. I'm just like very basic. I do teach my kids to pray, but we don't just go way into religion like I was raised, you know? I mean, I think
Yeah.
it's very, I think religion can be used by men to control people in a very dangerous way. And that's obviously what I experienced. So I do love to know that there's a God that my mother died. I hope to see her again, you know. I just, it's hard for me to ever look at a person and consider that they are above me as far as my connection to God. I think I can talk to him just as well as anyone else. And I guess that's my perspective on religion. And so I don't necessarily believe in religion, so to say, any religion. I just believe in God.
Since you left, what has life been like living outside, literally and metaphorically, outside the walls of FLDS, and kind of learning what life is like on that side?
Yeah, I mean, it takes years of undoing. It takes years to I mean, there's just so many things to learn and realize out here. And every year it's like you can look back and be like, wow, I've learned so much more. You know, I've realized so much more. And yes, I've changed so much. I look back at the girl that left and I'm like, and even that wrote my book, and I'm like, wow, I'm a whole different person now. It's just, I don't know. I mean, when I first left, I felt really strongly like, oh, I'm going to prove to my family that I'm going to be a pure girl and just find a guy and marry him. Like, I'm not just going to date around or anything. Gosh, I should have dated around because now I'm going through a divorce. I mean, you know, all these things that are like, I was trying to prove that I was a pure person or still live by some of those principles that I thought might be true, where now I'm just like, it wasn't that big of a deal. I needed to give myself more time and more experience instead of rush into things because I was trying to prove that I was a good person.
Yeah. How about relationships? What are they like for you?
Like, like dating relationships or what?
Any relationships, really. I'm sure that, after FLDS, you know, trust
I
and
had a
just,
lot of FLDS men trying to like contact me and want to marry me, polygamous men especially, you know. And I was strong. Like, I knew I didn't want to live polygamy. I didn't feel, I hated it. It was terrible. It's terrible for the kids. It really is. And I just was like, no, I'm not going to willingly go into a polygamous relationship. And a lot of polygamists outside the FLDS had tried to contact me and made me feel like, oh, we're the right way. We're the right way. You know, they all think they're the right ones. And it's just like such a mess. And the funny thing about people like the polygamous cults, all the different ones, they fight amongst each other. They all tear each other down. It's like, I don't really believe in it. What I think is interesting, going back to the religion thing, is it's one thing if we get taught, oh, just believe in God, right? And get baptized or whatever. But no, it's like all these religions fight against each other and think they're right. And I'm like, none of you are Christ-like. You're all just fucking mess because you just think you're all so good, but you're all such a mess. You just want to control everybody. But, you know, that's just how it is. And so, I mean, I really saw that a lot after I left. I think I'm hypersensitive to cults. Like, I see other religious groups, and I think, obviously, I see their tendencies to be cultish. That I live around a lot of Mennonites, and I'm like, I just see that same control. I see it in so many different religions that it's just like, I think, but I'm obviously hypersensitive to it, that maybe other people would just be like, oh, just leave them alone,
Do you think about your life inside the FLDS religion and community often, or have you gotten to a point in your life where you've got a life to live, you've got bills to pay, you've got children to raise? I'm just kind of curious how prominent that.
I actually I'm trying to focus. I mean, sometimes I'll bring up a story from the past, but I obviously do my social media, but I actually try to stay more in the present. I like to live in the present. I like to focus on the present and not always bring up the past about how it used to be. I mean, yes, I think there's lots of lessons to be learned, and I think more importantly, because I'm in the middle of writing a book right now about my healing journey. I think that's way more important now, to help people heal from these tragic experiences and see that you can be strong and that you can be happy. And I think when you constantly live the past, then you're living the victim mentality instead of, we can all be happy, we can still succeed. I think you have to use your experiences to become wiser instead of feeling like, dang, why did I have to go through so many terrible things, because then we can just tear ourselves down, and then we're just an emotional mess. I mean, really. I mean, if we sit and wonder why, then we don't get anywhere. But when we use it to be wiser and to make a better life, then I think that's what we get hard experience for, and we gotta have hard experience.
Can you talk a little bit about your path to healing? I've heard a lot of conversations with people who have been through things similar to you, who have escaped cults and organizations and groups like this, and I've always wondered what that journey looks like. I'm sure that there is therapy and conversations with people who understand. Like, what does that look like for you?
Obviously, I know a lot of people that have left, and they're different pathways. I mean, there's obviously people that get addicted to drugs and all that. I mean, because they can't handle it, or they can't get over the victim mentality and all that. I mean, I've seen people that therapy really, really helps. I mean, obviously, I didn't necessarily go to therapy, but I think we all get therapy in different ways. So, I mean, I have family that definitely benefited from therapy and all that, and counseling. And I think that's very important. I personally haven't really really done that, but I think I've found my own therapy through the things I love to do. And, I think we just find it in different ways. I have always believed in being very positive and finding the good in every situation. I mean, for me personally, I think staying busy is one of the, sorry. I think for me personally, staying busy in things I love to do has been a big healing thing for me. Instead of dwelling on the past, just staying busy in things I love to do and educating myself. Education is a huge part of it, because you just learn so much from education. So, I mean, I think I'm a researcher. I do all that kind of stuff. Maybe I'm unique in that way compared to some people, because that's just always been me. And I don't know if I might just say, I don't know. I see a lot of people make a lot of really sad mistakes. I mean, there's been a lot of suicides from people who've escaped this cult, or many cults, I guess, for that matter. I don't know. I think what I've tried to do really, really with my life, and for the people that have for all the people that have left and anyone who's leaving a cult, is to try and show them that you can be happy and that you can be successful and you don't have to live in the past. And that's really my mission and my journey.
For someone like you who's been through what you've been through, I can understand if it's tough to answer, but are you happy? Have you found happiness in the life that you have now? Like, you've been through so much and you've gone through so much with, I'm curious if you have allowed yourself to find a place of happiness.
Yeah, I think I have. I mean, I've allowed myself to, I mean, I love myself. And I think when we love ourselves, then we're happy. I mean, we have to allow ourselves, when we're not healed, we don't love ourselves. And I think it's about finding us in a place that we actually love ourselves. And we can start by doing that, by finding habits that we love, that are good for us and help us become happy. I mean, I think, yes, I am happy.
Since Warren Jeffs was taken to jail and taken to prison, and since he, was tried and convicted, has he ever tried to contact you? Have you ever contacted him? And if so, what was that contact like?
I have never tried to contact him. I know he talks about me all the time. He has convinced himself in his own delusional way that I still am faithful to him because he cannot handle the thought that his kids have turned against him. So delusionally, he talks about me in his revelations, so to say, as though I am in the celestial kingdom now. I am in heaven. I am, because he doesn't hear from me, he delusionalizes where I am to make himself feel good about me and what I'm doing, Personally, no, he hasn't actually. I mean, if he has, he's probably done messages or whatever. No one will reach out to me because they know I'm very against him. But as far as me, no, I've never tried to reach out to him or talk to him.
And I'm sorry, I keep saying this is the last question, but this really is the last question. Obviously, the things that Warren Jeffs did, he said, he told you and everyone, these are things he was doing in the name of religion, in the name of faith and spirituality. Do you think, I'm curious if you think he really thought that, or was that nothing more than a means to justify his own horrific behavior?
I've actually thought that same thing. I have wondered so often, did he truly believe in God? He was doing terrible things. And I just really wonder, or if he knew. I mean, I remember even through our growing up years, he'd tell us girls, you girls have got to learn to sneak. You've got to learn to sneak around your mothers, to be basically deceivers. And I just remember thinking, is this real? I mean, this is against what we're taught in general. But yet, quietly, you're teaching us this. I don't know. When I think about all that, I'm like, I really wonder if he knew all along and had this plan that he was going to deceive the people into this terrible place that he took them. And he very well could have. I don't know that he actually believes in God, unless he's like any very delusional criminal that I feel like he thinks he is God at this point, because he wouldn't allow himself to think he did anything wrong. I think he believes he's God.
Yeah, because that debate has oftentimes been kind of ushered in, like, when you look at people like David Koresh, right, who were convinced that they were a prophet, mm-hmm. and had multiple wives and had sexual relations with underage people.
Yeah.
And whether they actually believed what they were using as justification, or if it was nothing more than, just kind of a snake oil salesman of sorts. Was he just kind of selling a mess,
Yeah, I think of all, because, I've studied all that with those different people, and I think they get to a place where they just love them. They just care about themselves so much that they believe themselves are God. I think that's all they want to do is be God and have that much control. I don't think they care about God. I think in the end, they're going to throw God out of it and put themselves as God, because that's what they really want.
Right. Rachel, I can't thank you enough for this conversation. I find this kind of conversation really interesting. People that have gone through what you've gone through and managed to come out on the other side with a perspective that's really, really fascinating to hear. So we really appreciate you giving us some time today.
Yeah.
I want to give you the opportunity. You've written a book, correct?
Yeah.
So you do have a book called Breaking Free: How I Escaped Polygamy, the FLDS Cult, and My Father, Warren Jeffs. That is available wherever you purchase books, Amazon, a good old-fashioned bookstore, perhaps. And did you say you're working on a new book?
I am working on a new book.
Oh, wonderful. Is there anything you want to tell us about that?
I mean, I don't know for sure when it will be released or anything, but hopefully within the next 2 years.
Wonderful. Okay, well, Rachel, thank you so much for being with us. We really, really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.